Hello, my babies. I am the adorable Eva Webb. Welcome to Titular Characters. In this 61st issue, we're featuring Jenna Lyn Wright. Jenna is a screenwriter and comics writer that specializes in commercial character-driven horror, thriller, and science fiction stories. She's done work for Scout Comics and Zenescope. Her psychological thriller, Ambition, was released in theaters nationwide by Shout Factory in 2019, and her script, Day 2, was featured on the 2015 Blood List of Best Unproduced Genre Screenplays. Hi, Jenna. Welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
So I understand you've got a really exciting project going on with Scout. Can you tell me about it?
Absolutely. I am super excited. It is a mini-series that I have coming out. My artist is Carl Sleminski, and my letterer is Taylor Esposito, and I am the writer of a book called Cult of Icarus. And we hooked up with Scout a little bit ago, and it has been nothing but a pleasure working with them. It's got, let's see, it's got magic in it. It's got vampires. It's got a foster kid who is looking for her roots and discovers that she is something more than human and possibly a harbinger of the apocalypse.
That sounds like it just sort of checks all the boxes for something that I personally would love to read.
Oh, that makes me happy. Yeah, and don't worry about not reading it. It's actually not out yet. It should be coming out from Scout, I want to say later this fall. It'll be solicited later this fall. So
awesome. So I feel like comics creators, much like the characters and works they create, have origin stories.
Yeah.
What's yours?
I actually started out in film. I have lived on both the East Coast and the West Coast, New York and LA. And I originally started out my comics experience being a book scout for 20th Century Fox and Fox 2000. And so my job was to discover books to turn into films, and that it also included comic books and graphic novels. So my first Comic-Con experience, I believe, was going to NYCC back in like 2007, back when it was so much smaller than it is today. And then when I moved out to LA, I kind of did the same thing, but for a production company. So it was just like scouring the shelves for things to make. And then once I veered off into creating rather than on the like executive side, I stayed away from comics for a long time because I was so focused on film. And when I met Carl, who is my artist, who I've mentioned before, he really kind of brought me back into comics and made me excited to really dig into them and dive into them and immerse myself in them. And I realized that I not only wanted to read them, I wanted to try my hand at making them. And it has been quite a learning curve because writing film is completely different than writing a script for comics. And he's really kind of been my educator and given me things to read, things to study, things to learn. And I hope that I'm getting better every day, but it's been a steep climb. It's been a lot of fun though. Comics are incredible.
It totally makes sense that book scouts exist.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've ever met one before.
Oh, if you have to have a day job, it's the best job in the world. You literally get paid to talk to people about books and to read books in your free time. It's wonderful.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Gosh, I feel like I've been wasting my life as a computer programmer.
No, not at all. I totally stumbled into it. Like it just so happened that an internship I had, my boss there was friends with the gentleman who needed an assistant, and he put my name up, but I still had to go in and interview and give the resume and do all of that stuff. And working for Fox was actually a really wonderful experience as well. I was really lucky, but there was this kind of tight knit community back in the I want to say the late 2000s where every studio had a book scout for them. And we all used to get together and talk about books and, go shoot darts and drink beer. And it was kind of a little clubhouse. It was really nice. A lot of that has disbanded, as it just seems to be that they're focused more on IP that doesn't necessarily involve needing a book scout. Like they've given the jobs to people in the company. It doesn't need to be a separate department really so much anymore, but they do still exist. And if you can snag a job like that, I highly recommend it. It's wonderful to have homework that's just reading novels or nonfiction.
So is it like writing a book report?
Not even. What we would do is we would get partial manuscripts and or maybe old books or books that had been public domain. And when I worked at Fox, we would actually separate them out. So my colleague took a lot of the nonfiction and kind of heavier material, and I 100% volunteered to read the YA, to read the horror, to read the genre, and like all of the stuff that I considered really fun. And you'd print out 50 to 100 pages and take 3 or 4 of those, 5 or 6 of them home for a weekend and read them. And if you're not hooked or see the concept in the first 100 pages or so, you can set it aside. Or if you know that the company is only looking for a certain type of project, you can say, well, this doesn't fit the mold. And it's a little bit harsh because it seems like you're not giving everything a fair shake because you're not reading the whole thing. But it's the same thing with film. Like, I mean, if an executive reads your script and you don't capture them in the first 10 pages or so, they're probably not going to read beyond because they just don't have the time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So when you're working on comics, where do good collaborations come from? What are the ingredients of it?
I feel like great collaboration comes from listening. I feel like, especially in creative projects that people are excited about, everyone really wants to get their ideas out and be the one to steer the ship. And I feel like if you're not listening to your collaborators, instead of just waiting for your turn to pitch your idea, it's not going to work out. You all kind of have to come together and have it really be a shared experience and not value one creator over another. And I feel like that's rare, especially these days. It's funny because in film, the director gets a lot of the credit and the writers kind of get walked over or pushed to the side. And in comics, it's been quite an experience that it's the exact opposite. It is the writers tend to get most of the glory, and the artists are almost seen as the ones that are disposable or replaceable or can get pushed to the side. And it's been quite a shock to the system. And so I feel like, especially in comics, the key to a good collaboration is a writer listening to their artist, because the artist is going to be the one who's interpreting their script. And while it might not be exactly what you have in your head when you're writing it, they're probably going to bring a lot to the page that even you couldn't imagine. So just being open to valuing what they bring, maybe even more so than what you bring, I think is key.
So you would approach it like an equal partnership, I think is what you're saying.
Absolutely. I would never dream of like telling an artist, no, do it this way. Because if I've chosen an artist, it's because I already know what they can do and I trust them to execute what they're going to do on the page, interpreting what I've done. So if they say, listen, this layout looks better this way, or I think you should have the character over here, I'm absolutely going to defer to them. They have a whole visual language that I'm not privy to, and I'm hoping that they're going to elevate what I do.
Do you have a particular emotional place you like to write from? Where do you find your zen?
I tend to stay mainly in genre. I work a lot in the horror space, and I always tend to run into people who say, wait, but you seem so nice. You seem so sweet. You're a girl. Why do you want to write horror? Why do you want to make horror? And like, I mean, I'll say, I grew up, my dad gave me a Stephen King book to read when I was 4. It's just what was on our shelves. And it's, Edgar Allan Poe is my boy. Like this is where I come from. And I find that, writing in the horror space is very, cathartic for me, in the sense that I've always been a little bit of a morbid person. I was a morbid kid, and like working through my issues with, your inevitable demise, writing about death, that's the only time you can actually control it. And I've been lucky that I haven't experienced a lot of death in the family or whatever in my life, but like, it's still this preoccupation that I've had. And it's the little bit of control I can get over it is working through it on the page. I think loss and death and fear and anxiety, things like that. So I love horror. I think it's the best.
So as far as world building, where does that start?
A writer that's smarter than me. I read an interview with once, I believe his name is John Spates. He's a screenwriter. He said the story either has to start with a situation you have in your head and then a character who is least equipped to deal with that situation, or a character in your head and then you put them in a situation to which they are least equipped to deal. And so with me, it tends to be plot before character. I always have an idea for a story before I know who's going to be driving the engine. But I think it all comes down to details. The more specific that you can be, whether that's pulling from your real life or pulling from other books or things that you've read, because we all steal, it all happens. Specificity is the key to world building, I think, because if you can have these big macro ideas, but what's really going to make it feel authentic for people are little nuances, sights, smells, tastes, emotions that you can't get any other way besides. Like for me, I grew up in the Northeast, and so summer is marked by humidity and haze and cicadas and grasshoppers and fireflies, whereas for someone else, they're going to focus on the way, tiny bits of snow feel stinging their face in like the tundra in winter. It's the more specific you can be, I think, the better.
How do your characters find their voices?
Oh, that usually takes me a while. I tend to write short, so I write, especially dialogue. My first pass is always very on the nose. It's very like, as you know, here's a thing I should say. And then I go over it, 3 or 4 times, and I'm like, okay, now this person has to sound like a human. So what would an actual human say in this situation? And so it's a lot of refining for me. And as the story goes along, I feel like I find these people's voices, and then I have to go back to the beginning and make them sound like they sound at the end. And it's just a matter of going over it and over it and over it. And especially on Cult of Icarus, like I've done a script and then I've had Carl read it, and Carl's been creating comics for decades. And he'll say, yeah, listen, but not this here. Like, and then he'll give me a suggestion and I'll say, okay, but I've discovered that this person now sounds like this, so they wouldn't say it this way. They'll have to say it this way. And as I go through it and almost talk out loud to myself, I can figure out what these people are going to be like. I actually just took a script out that I had written almost 10 years ago, a film script that I reread because I just kind of can't let it go. And I realized that a lot of the dialogue in it was just getting from plot point to plot point as opposed to infusing it with real emotion. And so it's kind of a never-ending battle to make things feel as real as possible while also moving your character from point A to point B in a realistic way, in an interesting way. That's not dialogue can only be so real before it gets dull. It also has to have that spark to it. So it's tough. It's really tough to find voice, I find. It takes me a while.
How do you approach diversity and representation in your work?
I have found, again, this starting out in film, if you don't specify the race of a character, or if it's important to the story, the sexuality of a character, they will always default to white. They will always default to straight. And so I've made a point to, in naming characters, make that name authentic to who I believe that character should be, or specifically saying this character is African American, this character is, non-binary, this character is whatever. And you may get pushback. Executives may come back and say, well, we want to sell this to such and such a market, so we're going to have you switch this woman to a man. But I actively try to do my best to tell the story and match the character in the best way possible. So I don't necessarily, I am a white woman. And so I actually worked on a project called Ignition with a gentleman named Sean Pryor. He had me come on and co-write with him. And the main character in the story was an African-American woman. And the artist on the project was a woman of color. And I made sure when I spoke with her and when I spoke with Sean, I was like, I'm going to be writing dialogue. I'm going to be writing situations of which I, of course, have not been in this character's shoes, and I never will be. So please, if I'm doing something wrong or I'm doing something in a way that is inauthentic, let me know. Don't be afraid to tell me, because I don't want to do a disservice to this character because of my ignorance. And this is going to be your life experience. So I feel like you just have to be open and willing to say, yeah, I'm the writer, but that doesn't mean I know everything. Ask for help if you need it and give people credit where they deserve.
Nice. That's a really thoughtful answer. I really appreciate that.
Thanks.
Hang on. Oh, yeah. So the question I wanted to ask, not one of the usual ones, is so with your film background, do you find that editors have similar roles to producers, or is it a completely different type of relationship?
It is similar and yet very different in terms of the mechanics of the changes. So working on Cult of Icarus, we have an editor named Nicole. She's been lovely. And it's very much been punctuation, grammar, the way that the dialogue sits on the page in terms of lettering and things like that. It's very nitty gritty. Whereas in film, when you get a producer on the project, especially if they're giving you money, which they should be, and a lot of them don't, it's more macro story beats. I've never worked with an editor in comics that has had a ton of say in the way that the story is plotted out or unfurls on the page. It's always been smaller bits of the story, whereas the minute someone gives you money in film, they have a say in how every bit of the story is done, from the dialogue to the settings to the set pieces to down to the page count, really. So I'd say that the producers in film have a much more extensive role in how things play out rather than in comics, at least so far. I'm sure that if I were to work at a big two on a Marvel or DC book or something like that, where there's all this continuity and all of these things you have to keep in mind, that the editor would have a much bigger role in terms of how the story played out, for sure.
How do you make a story distinct and memorable?
I think that you have to rope people in with both emotion and excitement, because in terms of what I do, and I talk about this in horror a lot, is good horror is just character drama where scary stuff happens to occur. If something is just scary for the sake of being scary, but you don't care who it's happening to, you've failed. And so in order to make something memorable, you have to hit people on a visceral level in terms of stoking their fear or their anxiety, but you also want to hit them on a very basic emotional level where you care about the people that the situation is happening to. And then at the same time, you don't want it to just be misery porn. Like, you want people to be excited and enthralled and like rooting for the characters that you've created. And so, especially in comics, one of the things I've really had to learn is focusing on the page turn, like making sure that at the end of every page, you can't wait to see what happens next. And especially at the end of every issue, oh my gosh, I cannot wait for the next issue. Like, you got to keep them hanging on. So it's a mix of really kind of deep emotional work while also trying to keep the popcorn factor there. Like, I want people to be entertained and emotionally invested.
That's interesting. It sounds like a fine line almost, that you have to just sort of balance all of these different factors. How do you do it?
Yeah, it's tough. And it's been one of the hardest things for me to learn is like, in film, it's all about the page turn as well. You don't want anybody to put your script down, but in comics, it is so imperative that the pacing of the dialogue, ending things on a question so that people have to turn the page to find the answer, or ending things on a interesting visual note so that people can't wait to turn that page or can't wait to get that next issue. I find that it's very, very, very difficult, and at least to do it well. I feel like a lot of people can write, and not a lot of people can write well. And it's only the matter of one word there, but I think it's an extensive idea that just because you can write a sentence doesn't mean you can write a compelling novel or a compelling screenplay. And to balance that, it's a real skill. I'll just say that to be able to get people to keep wanting to turn the page. And it's something that I'm still learning to do.
Interesting. So what makes a story compelling in that way?
I would say for me, for what I write, it's usually when people are in jeopardy or in danger. But for those that write drama, it could be when a character is about to get their heart broken, or when that someone is leaving home for the first time. It's all of that good, juicy drama. It's all of these experiences that we as humans universally have. Like, everyone has lost someone. Everyone has loved someone, hopefully. Most people have left home for the first time, or lost a grandparent, or lost a pet even. And the smallest moments can have the biggest impact. And I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling and I'm losing my train of thought, but it's about that emotion. That's the most important thing that I've learned, and that's what it took me the longest time to learn.
For what it's worth, you're not rambling at all. I think this is really, really exciting stuff.
Good.
This is good radio right here. When you're writing a comic, do you put much thought into the different formats and mediums that it's going to appear in, like print versus comicsology?
I would like to say yes, but the truth is no. I'm so focused on just the page as it is. Like, let me put it this way. I've never tried to do a webtoon. And I know that those are read, I believe, vertically, right? They scroll as opposed to a page flip. But yeah, in terms of comics, when I'm writing, I always think of it in the physical medium as opposed to the digital medium, which I'm not sure if that's right or wrong, but I myself am a bit of a physical media junkie. So that's kind of the way my brain always defaults.
So now that you've been writing comics,
yeah,
Is the experience of producing one different than you thought it would be?
Absolutely. It is, and I'm sure that this is terrible to say, but it's so much less stressful so far than writing a screenplay, because when you're writing a film script, especially if you're a solo writer, sometimes I have a writing partner. It's all on you. It is all on you to create this visual in the reader's mind of what you want them to see, and everything that you do has to be so meticulous, so that, because you don't have the benefit of the visuals, like that's what the director is for. And in writing comics, if you're working with people that you trust, I find that my job is so much easier because of the collaboration with the artist. I know that I can write crowd scene, and, you know, this poor artist is going to have to draw so many people, and it's probably going to look spectacular, and they're going to make me look good is what it comes down to. And so the pressure truly is off of me. The only pressure I feel is that I don't want to look like a fool in front of the artist. Like, I want to write them a script that they enjoy reading, that they are going to enjoy thumbnailing and laying out, and a story that they get excited by. In terms of the reader, I know that the artists I'm working with are going to deliver. And so the pressure is off of me in that instance. And that's so selfish, I feel like, to say, but it's the truth.
Would you say you're the kind of writer that starts with an idea and writes, or do you plan out every aspect of the story?
I used to be someone who just had a vague idea of what I wanted to do, and then would kind of go and just write the whole thing. And then my manager was like, listen, if you're going to do this professionally, you can't kind of go off the rails and do whatever you want. You might want to try outlining. And outlining is the worst and also the best, because now I get all the hard story work done before I write the actual script. So writing the script has become so much easier because I've already done all the hard work ahead of time. And the more that you outline, the more you get used to it, the better you get at it. And I don't want to say it gets less hard, but you get more familiar with it. And now I much prefer doing all of that work first, because if you get 60 pages into a script and you realize you've gone off on a tangent that has nothing to do with what you really want to say, you then have to go back and fix 60 pages, as opposed to going back to maybe a 6-page document, being like, oh, I'm an idiot, I went off course on page 4, and fixing it from there. It's so much less work to do. So I am very much now a meticulous outliner, to the point where I will do bullet points, and then I will take those bullet points and flesh them out into small paragraphs, and then go from there.
Okay, so do you have a favorite issue, story, or title of all time?
Oh, gosh, of all time, that's tough. I will say that the story that I found the most compelling, one of the most compelling of all times, was the run on Constantine that Cy Spurrier just did. I picked up issue 1 of that, and from the writing to the art to the lettering to the entire thing, I believe it was 12 issues. That was one of the first comics in a very long time that I did not wait for. I picked it up every Wednesday that it came out. I thought it was brilliant, utterly brilliant.
Nice. What are you reading right now?
I actually just read The Nice House. Is it The Nice House on the Lake? I always want to call it The Last House on the Left. The Nice House on the Lake, the James Tinian book. I really, really enjoyed that. I also picked up the new Shadow Man, the one that Cullen Bunn is doing. And gosh, I know there's another one, and now I can't think of it. I was also reading, I picked up a few issues of Witchblood, the one that Matthew Ehrman and Lisa Sturl are doing.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
So when was the last time a comic made you cry?
Ooh, I don't know that a comic has ever made me cry, so I don't know if I'm reading the right comics, huh? What are some that you would suggest? What are some that you think would hit me right in the feels?
If you want Red in the Fields, go for Death, High Cost of Living, or
Okay.
Sandman. Neil Gaiman will always make you cry.
Oh, he's so
Always.
brilliant. He is so
He,
brilliant.
he's one of my favorite writers. He's like totally my literary hero. Just everything he's ever done is gold, except
Oh
for his
yeah,
movies. But there's a lot of people involved in the film stuff, so I forgive him for that.
That's true. That's true. No, I think he's wonderful. He's absolutely wonderful.
So is there anyone that comes to the forefront of your mind as either the most underrated or most inspiring creator in comics?
In comics, let's see. I would say that there are a lot of people out there doing great work that I don't know if they get as much recognition as they should. They're the people who I think consistently do wonderful things, and yet I feel like I never see them like when awards time comes around. So it's usually it's usually artists too. It's people like Jason Sean Alexander, Ben Temple-Smith, Jim Mahfood. I'm loving, oh my gosh, what's his name? I love Matthias Bergara. It's a lot of people that I think are just doing really, really beautiful, inspiring work. And their names are ones that are passed around in like people who know, but they're not like the flashy ones that everyone talks about. Like, I feel like everyone knows the name Donny Cates. Everyone knows the name. Now I'm not thinking of any names, but I think it's usually a lot of artists that I see that I just think their work is utterly gorgeous, and I don't hear enough about them.
So Jenna, we are heading up against the end of the show.
Already?
Ready
Oh
for
my
the fun
goodness.
part?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll start with an easy one. What's your favorite food?
My favorite food. Can I do a favorite meal? It's Thanksgiving dinner. I would eat mashed potatoes and gravy every day of my life if I could.
Yeah, that's totally valid.
Awesome.
So would you say you're a cat person or a dog person?
I grew up with both, but I think that I am definitely a cat person. I have a cat right now. Her name is Cat Murdoch, after Matt Murdock.
Oh, wow. I wish I would have thought of that. That is awesome.
I want to get her a brother named the Punisher.
I have to come to you next time I need to name a cat. That's just the facts of it.
Absolutely.
So what's the best swear word?
Oh, horse shit.
I love it.
Because you can say it with like your guts. You can just push like horse shit.
And it fits into a surprisingly versatile number of situations.
So true. It's so versatile. It's a good word for it, versatile.
So where do you find joy?
Honestly, this is going to sound super cheesy, but in creating, I am never happier than on a day where I feel like I've done good, solid work. And I never feel worse than when I feel blocked or like I can't figure out a story point. Like, I don't necessarily really believe in writer's block. I just think if you have writer's block, then you probably haven't sat with your story for long enough. But yeah, there are definitely moments when I come up against a plot point or an emotional beat that I can't quite figure out, and I just get miserable. And then when I figure it out, it's the best feeling in the world. It's getting to wake up every day and make up stuff for fun that hopefully people will read and enjoy. It's the best feeling in the world.
What inspires you?
Other creators and other creators who are both good and bad at what they do, because I find that I am most motivated. It's awful, I know, but I find that I am most motivated when I read something or watch something where my first thought is, I think I could have done this better, and here's how, because then my brain goes a million miles an hour into a new story world of like, okay, how would I have done this? How would I have executed this? And it doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that it wasn't for me, but it inspires me to get off my ass and do better, like make more cool stuff. And then when I see something that I love, a movie that I love, or I read something that I love, that inspires me, but also to a lesser extent, because that's a little intimidating. It's just like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be that good, but I can try.
Okay, so here's what happened. You are in an epic battle with Thanos.
Oh, wow.
He's got the Infinity Glove, and he's right about to snap his fingers and wipe out half of all life in the universe. Now, you catch a lucky break, because just before he's about to snap his fingers, he falls dead of a heart attack, which puts you in possession of the Infinity Gauntlet. You can now bend reality to your whim. What do you do with it?
Okay. My non-selfish answer is that, can the Infinity Gauntlet, just so I'm straight, can it do anything?
Pretty much anything. It's one of those literary, there's a word for it. It could do absolutely anything you want it to.
Anything I want to do. So in my non-selfish answer, it's going to be something to the effect of, eradicate hatred, solve world hunger, make sure that everyone is taken care of and able to live their best lives in a way that makes them happy and hurts no one else. My selfish answer is that I give myself like $1 trillion to fund my own projects and all of the people who I think are brilliant geniuses projects, so they never have to worry about anything ever again and can just live their best lives creating awesome shit.
That is amazing. That is a really cool answer.
Thanks. It's the truth. All I want is to see more good art that is inspiring and just making people happy to create.
So what's next for Jenna Lyn Wright?
Oh my goodness. So I have a couple of pitches I'm working on for comics. One I'm really excited about. It's a really cool werewolf story. And another one is about a girl gang of witches. It's kind of Mean Girls-y, but also a little bit like the Skulls. But that one needs some fleshing out. So I'm working on that. So there may be a Kickstarter in my future, maybe not. It depends on whether or not the pitches are picked up by the people I'm pitching to. And then on the film side, I have a couple of projects with directors attached and a couple with producers attached. And it's just, the slow and sluggish process of trying to get those made. With COVID, everything kind of slowed down. But I didn't take the last year off. I've just been working harder than ever in silence. And so there's a good half dozen projects in both mediums that could potentially go at any time, which is very exciting.
That's awesome. Well, Jenna, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to come by and be on my humble little podcast. This has been an amazing show.
This has been so much fun. I can't thank you enough for having me on. It's been an absolute blast.
So where can people find you online?
I am on Instagram and Twitter, and my handle for both is at Jenna Lyn Wright, Lyn, 1N. And I also have a website at jennalynwright.com, and there's a contact form there. If anybody ever wants to reach out, I do get those emails, and I'm happy to chat.
And now, it's time to close the show. Imagine it. The lights beginning to come on in an empty theater. People starting to get up from their seats. The smell of popcorn crushed on the floor. And the thought runs through your head that Titular Characters is awesome, and you want to support it. Fear not, my friends. There are tons of ways to do it. You can follow Eva at EvaIsAdorable on Twitter. You can leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, Castbox, or Podcast Addict. And if you're feeling super generous, you can leave some dough at buymeacoffee.com/EvaIsAdorable. There, you can contribute as little as $1, and every bit goes towards paying for production and hosting of this show. How cool is that? Titular Characters is a show about the things we love. It is produced and hosted by the adorable Eva Webb. Opening theme by Antonia Marquis. Closing theme by Mikey Flash of Speed Force Music. The dreamy announcer guy who reads the credits is Donnie Underwood. That's me. Join us next time for another death-defying adventure in cyberspace. See you then!